cavern smelled of damp earth and ancient stone, untouched for millennia. Ryon's boots crunched over scattered debris as his flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows over the cryptic carvings along the walls. He had come here with a group of researchers, but when an unexpected cave-in separated him from the rest, he had no choice but to venture deeper alone. "Great," he muttered, shaking his flashlight. "Just my luck." The air in the chamber ahead shimmered, almost as if it were alive. At the center of the room stood a pedestal draped in thick dust. Upon it lay an ornate black coffin, carved with symbols that pulsed faintly under his light. Curiosity outweighed caution. He approached, running his fingers over the smooth stone. The carvings were like nothing he'd ever seen before, somewhere between organic and mechanical, humming softly under his touch. Then, the moment he brushed against the central glyph, the air exploded with energy. A violent gust swirled around him, lifting his feet off the ground. The entire chamber trembled. The coffin began to glow, its carvings shifting, rearranging themselves as if they were alive. Panic shot through Ryon. "Oh, hell no!" He stumbled backward, but it was too late. The coffin cracked open. A surge of violet light blinded him, followed by an overwhelming wave of heat. When the glow subsided, he saw her. She rose slowly, her body unfolding with the grace of something divine. Her skin was a deep shade of sapphire, smooth and radiant, almost otherworldly. Long silver-white hair cascaded down her back, moving as if caught in an unseen current. She had tall, elegant horns curving back from her temples, and her eyes, deep, glowing violet pools, pierced through him with an intensity that made his heart stutter. She was mesmerizing, terrifying, otherworldly. Her full lips parted, voice like a whisper of silk and storms. "You have awakened me." Ryon swallowed hard. Hi." Her gaze darkened. Then, before he could react, she moved. She was suddenly in front of him, pressing a single clawed finger against his chest. A jolt of raw energy shot through him, stealing his breath. His knees buckled, and he barely remained standing. Her eyes narrowed. "Strange. You are not like the others." "What others?" he gasped, gripping his chest. It still tingled where she had touched him. She tilted her head, studying him as if he were an anomaly. "You are not of my world. Yet your energy is unlike anything I have ever tasted." That was when it hit him what she had said. Tasted. I think we should talk about that." A slow smile curled her lips. "Yes, we should." Ryon's legs wobbled as he took a cautious step back. "So, when you say tasted, what exactly do you mean?" The alien woman, who still hadn't given her name, watched him intently, her violet gaze tracing over his form as if she could see the energy flowing beneath his skin. "I feed on male energy," she said plainly. Ryon nearly choked on his own breath. "That's specific." She smirked, stepping closer. "It is how my kind survives." Her fingers trailed along the air between them, and though she didn't touch him directly, he felt it. A gentle pull, like static dancing over his skin. "But you," she mused, "you are different. Your energy is abundant." He wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a death sentence. "So, feeding. What does that entail?" Her smirk deepened, and he had the distinct feeling she enjoyed watching him squirm. "Do you fear me, human?" Ryon laughed nervously. "You did just say you feed on guys. So, yeah, kinda." She regarded him for a long moment before sighing. "I do not consume life force in the way you fear. My kind was meant to bond, to sustain ourselves through connection." "Bond," he echoed. Before he could react, she reached out and touched his forehead. Instantly, heat flooded his veins, warmth that wasn't painful but overwhelming, as if his body recognized something deep and ancient. It wasn't just physical. It was emotional. He saw flashes, visions of her, of a world beyond his comprehension, of a loneliness that stretched across eternity. She pulled back. "I have been asleep for thousands of years. I am starving." Ryon's breath came in shallow gasps. "You're not gonna, drain me dry, are you?" She laughed, a sound both rich and strangely delicate. No. If I wished to, you would already be empty. That wasn't exactly comforting. Then how do you, feed? He asked cautiously. Her eyes darkened slightly. Through connection. Intimacy. A willing exchange. His heart nearly leaped out of his chest. You mean? She arched a brow. I mean nothing crude, if that is your concern. She tilted her head. But deep bonds of the soul. Those offer the greatest sustenance. Ryon exhaled, trying to wrap his head around it. So, what's your name? For the first time, she hesitated. I was called Seris. Seris, he murmured, testing the name. Fit her, mystical, powerful, alluring. Her gaze softened ever so slightly. You have given me freedom, Ryon. For that, I owe you my gratitude. Something told him gratitude was just the beginning. The days following Seris' awakening were nothing short of surreal. Ryon had expected her to disappear, to vanish into the unknown like some kind of celestial phantom. But she didn't. Instead, she lingered, tethered to him by an invisible force neither of them fully understood. She didn't need food, didn't seem to require sleep, and yet she remained by his side, watching him with those piercing violet eyes, studying every little thing about him with the curiosity of a being who had never encountered a human before. Ryon wasn't sure if that was a good thing. You are unlike anything I have encountered, Seris murmured one evening as they sat near the remnants of their excavation site. The rest of the research team was still searching for a way to clear the collapsed passage, leaving Ryon stranded with an immortal alien who apparently fed on energy. He tossed another log onto the fire, watching the embers flare. Yeah? How so? She tilted her head, long silver hair catching the firelight like strands of liquid moonlight. Your energy, it does not wane in my presence. It should. Your kind, your men would weaken under my touch. But you, she reached out, her fingers hovering just above his forearm. And though she didn't make contact, Ryon felt it. An undeniable pull, like static clinging to his skin. You are resilient. Resilient, he repeated, rubbing his arm where the warmth lingered. I'll take that as a compliment. Her lips curled into a slow, knowing smile. It is. The way she looked at him made his pulse spike. Like she was seeing straight through him, past flesh and bone, deep into something more. He had never met anyone, anything, that made him feel so exposed. And yet, strangely, he didn't mind. You still haven't really explained what you need from me, he pointed out after a long moment. You said bonding, connection. What does that actually mean? Seris studied him for a beat before shifting, moving closer. Ryon tensed instinctively, but she didn't pounce on him, didn't overwhelm him with her presence. Instead, she simply reached out, her fingertips grazing his wrist. A surge of warmth coursed through him, not painful, not draining, but filling. As if she were taking from him but giving something in return. A gentle cycle of energy exchanged between them. He exhaled sharply. That's intense, she hummed. It has been so long since I have done this with a willing partner. His brain screeched to a halt. Wait, what? Seris chuckled. I did not mean it that way. Ryon groaned, scrubbing a hand over his face. You have to stop phrasing things like that. I enjoy watching your reactions, she admitted, smirking. You are amusing. Yeah, he shook his head. So, what, I just let you hold my wrist and that's enough? For now, her voice softened. The bond is not just physical. It is trust, it is understanding. It is choice. He let that sink in. And what happens if I choose not to? Her expression flickered, something almost vulnerable passing through her features before she masked it. Then I will grow weaker. And eventually I will fade. The weight of that statement settled between them. Ryon wasn't sure if she meant literal death or something else, but the idea of her just disappearing didn't sit right with him. Maybe it should have. Maybe he should have been more wary, more cautious. But looking at her now, at the way she was watching him with something that almost resembled hope, he found himself shaking his head. I'm not gonna let you fade, Seris. She stilled, something unreadable flickering across her expression. Then, slowly, her fingers tightened around his wrist. Then you are mine, Ryon. His breath hitched, She smiled, but this time, there was something softer in it. Not in the way you fear, but our energies have connected now. It is rare. A bond like this. He swallowed, feeling the warmth of her touch seeping deeper, spreading through his veins like liquid starlight. So what does that mean for me? Seris tilted her head. It means we will grow stronger together. And it means I will not leave your side. There was something oddly reassuring about that. He sighed, glancing up at the sky. The fire crackled between them, casting long shadows over the cavern walls. Guess that makes two of us, then. The days turned into weeks, and Ryon slowly accepted that his life was now bound to an immortal alien woman who fed on his energy. It should have been terrifying, but the more time he spent with Seris, the less he feared her. She wasn't some cold, unfeeling entity. She was curious, about Earth, about him, about the emotions she had long forgotten during her millennia of isolation. She asked questions he never expected, studied human interactions with a fascination that bordered on childlike wonder. And, in turn, he found himself drawn to her in a way he couldn't explain. At first, their bond was subtle. A touch here, a lingering glance there. Every time she reached for him, he felt that now familiar warmth spread through him, but it wasn't draining. It wasn't taking. It was something more, something shared. One evening, as they sat atop a grassy hill overlooking the city, Seris spoke in a quiet voice. "You do not fear me anymore." Ryon chuckled, leaning back on his elbows. "No, I don't." She tilted her head. "Why?" He sighed, glancing at her. "Because you've never given me a reason to." Seris was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Then, to his surprise, she murmured, "You are the first." Ryon frowned. "The first what?" "The first to see me as more than a force of nature. The first to choose to stay." She turned to him then, her violet eyes softening. "You are not bound to me, Ryon. And yet you remain." He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, well, you kinda grow on a guy." Seris smiled genuinely, warmly. "As do you." Something shifted in the air between them. Not the supernatural pull of her energy, not the overwhelming force of her presence, but something quieter, something real. Seris reached out, her fingers ghosting over his hand. He didn't flinch, didn't pull away. Instead, he laced his fingers with hers, and she sucked in a quiet breath. "Does this mean," she whispered, "that you accept our bond?" Ryon searched her face, seeing something unspoken in her expression. Hope, uncertainty, the tiniest hint of vulnerability. And he realized, in that moment, that this bond wasn't just about survival for her anymore. It was choice. His choice. Slowly he nodded. "Yes, Seris. I do." A soft exhale escaped her, almost like relief. Then, to his complete surprise, she shifted closer, resting her forehead against his. A surge of warmth spread between them, but this time, it wasn't just energy. It was something deeper, something more. Seris closed her eyes. "Thank you." Ryon smiled, squeezing her hand. "Anytime." And as they sat together, watching the first stars appear in the sky, he knew he was exactly where he was meant to be.